I'm going to talk about the story of Delilah. But first, we must mention Samson. Samson's birth was announced by an angel during a dark time for Israelites. Israel was under the rule and oppression of the Philistines. Samson was born a Nazarite and was set apart with supernatural strength from God to do his work in the nation of Israel. While Samson was incredibly strong in body, he was very weak in character. Among his character flaws was a fondness for Philistine women. Samson fell in love with a beautiful woman whose name was Delilah. The rulers in Philistine came to Delilah and offered her money if she could find out what made Samson so strong. Delilah went home and made a great meal for Samson and asked him what made him so strong. Samson answered her that if anyone ties him with 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, he'll become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of Philistines brought to Delilah 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called Samson, telling him that the Philistines were in the room. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. When Delilah said to Samson that he had made a fool of her and lied to her, she asked Samson again to tell her how he can be tied. Samson answered that if anyone ties him securely with new ropes that had never been used, he'll become as weak as any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. And then, with men hidden in the room, she called Samson, telling him that the Philistines are upon him. But he snapped the ropes of his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson that all that time he was making a fool of her and lying to her. She asked him again to say how he can be tied. Samson replied that if you weave the 7 braids of his hair in the head into a fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, he'll become as weak as any other man. So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his hair, wove them into a fabric, and tightened it. Again, she called Samson as if warning him that the Philistines are upon him. He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Delilah was annoyed at this point. Then she asked him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she probed him day after day until he was sick of it. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines and asked them to come back once more because Samson had told her everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After pulling him to sleep on her nap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and his strength left him. Then she called Samson, pretending to warn him about the Philistines who were about to attack him. Samson awoke from his sleep and thought he will go out as before and shake himself free, but he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they sent him to grind grains in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying that their god had delivered Samson, the enemy, into their hands. While they were in high spirits, they demanded that Samson to be brought before them and entertained them. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand to put him where he can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that he may lean against them. Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, saying, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached towards the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on one pillar and his left hand on the other. Samson then said, "God, please let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him. He had led Israel for 20 years. The story of Samson and Delilah provides several lessons and moral messages, including the dangers of succumbing to temptation. The story shows the dangers of giving in to physical desires and temptations, as Samson's love for Delilah led to his downfall. We also learn the importance of staying true to one's belief. Samson was a Nazarite, a person who was dedicated to God and had taken a vow to never cut his hair. However, he broke this vow by revealing his secret to Delilah, which ultimately led to his loss of strength and defeat. We learn that there is a consequence for pride and arrogance. Samson was a strong and powerful man, but he also had a prideful and arrogant personality, which caused him to underestimate his enemies and led to his capture and torture by the Philistines. We also learn about redemption and forgiveness. Despite all of Samson's weaknesses, he did turn back to God before he died.